Elias had always been drawn to the unknown. As a xenobiologist, he had studied countless alien species from afar, but nothing had prepared him for the jungle world of Violia. From the moment he stepped off the landing shuttle, the air had felt alive, thick with the scent of strange plants and the low hum of creatures he couldn't even see. Every leaf seemed to shimmer, every shadow could hide something entirely unexpected. His heart raced with excitement. The mission had been simple in theory: study the local fauna, record behavior patterns, and return with data that could benefit human colonies. But something in the reports hinted that Violia was special. There were stories of a creature, or rather a being, that none of the earlier survey teams had dared approach. They called her Lyra the Deadliest. She had a reputation across the planet. Predators gave her a wide berth, and rival tribes whispered her name in fear. Elias was fascinated. He wasn't seeking danger for the thrill, he sought understanding. But as he walked deeper into the dense jungle, he realized that fascination often walked hand in hand with risk. The first sighting came unexpectedly. Elias had paused by a sparkling river, noting the bioluminescent plants that lined the banks, when movement caught his eye. There, perched on a thick branch like a living shadow, was Lyra. Her skin shimmered in hues of silver and violet under the alien sun, her eyes glowing faintly as they observed him. She was beautiful in a way that felt both alien and familiar, her body poised like a predator ready to strike. Elias froze. He had read descriptions, seen scans, and studied footage, but nothing compared to the presence of a living being standing mere meters away. Lyra's gaze was sharp, calculating, and for a moment, Elias felt the weight of her intelligence pressing down on him. He reminded himself to breathe, to stay calm. Panic would be dangerous here. He raised a small scanner, trying to study her without making any sudden moves. His hands were steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. Lyra's eyes followed every motion. She tilted her head slightly, a subtle sign that she was curious, perhaps even amused. Elias' lips twitched into a small, cautious smile. Curiosity, it seemed, could bridge even the largest gaps. As he moved closer, he noticed the muscles under her shimmering skin, perfectly designed for agility and strength. She wasn't just dangerous, she was precise. Every movement was economical, efficient. He reminded himself that despite her reputation, she had not attacked, not yet. Then a small idea struck him. He reached into his pack and pulled out a compact holographic projector, the kind designed to display images of small animals for research purposes. With a flick of his wrist, he activated it. The device hummed softly and projected a three-dimensional image of a creature with exaggeratedly round eyes and tiny claws, looking directly at Lyra. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Lyra blinked. She leaned forward, her head cocked in a gesture almost identical to a curious domestic cat. Her eyes widened slightly, not in fear but in clear interest. Elias' smile grew. It worked. He had made her pause, made her consider something playful rather than dangerous. Careful not to make sudden moves, he allowed the hologram to rotate slowly, showing the small creature from all angles. Lyra stepped down from the branch, her movements fluid, silent, and graceful. She approached cautiously, inspecting the projection. Her fingers brushed the holographic image, and Elias held his breath. This was unprecedented. She had touched something completely foreign and responded with curiosity rather than aggression. The next few minutes were a delicate dance. Elias rotated the projector, nudging the image here and there, while Lyra mirrored him with precise movements, never leaving the hologram's side. He could see the shift in her demeanor, from wary to intrigued. Her tail flicked occasionally, a subtle indicator of excitement or perhaps amusement. Elias allowed himself a whisper of relief. He had heard stories of the deadliest alien girl, but now he realized that there was more to her than raw power. Intelligence, curiosity, and a streak of playfulness were also part of her. He had found a bridge into her world, a way to engage with her mind rather than just her strength. Then, without warning, she moved closer, and Elias instinctively took a step back. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly, and for a moment he thought she would lash out. But instead, she lowered her head, sniffing the air near him, testing his scent. The tension that had built in his chest began to ease. She was testing him, trying to understand him. Elias decided to take a risk. He gently spoke, not expecting her to understand, but hoping she could sense his tone. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly, his hands held visible and open. Lyra tilted her head again, a gesture that seemed almost contemplative. She didn't move away, nor did she attack. A soft rustling behind him startled Elias. He spun around, but it was only a small, harmless creature, glowing faintly as it hopped among the alien plants. When he turned back, Lyra had taken a step even closer, her gaze never leaving his. There was an unspoken understanding forming, a fragile trust. Hours passed like minutes as Elias observed and interacted with her. He documented every movement, every reaction, knowing that this was a rare opportunity. Lyra wasn't just a subject. She was a being with thoughts, feelings, and the ability to recognize intent. And she was learning about him just as much as he was learning about her. As night fell, the jungle transformed. Bioluminescent plants glowed brighter, and alien insects flitted through the air like living stars. Elias set up a small camp nearby, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Lyra watched silently from a nearby tree, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the environment. She made no move to leave, and for the first time, Elias felt a flicker of connection. He unrolled his sleeping mat and settled down, keeping his equipment close. Lyra stayed perched, observing, until she finally lay down a short distance away. The tension that had defined their first meeting softened into something tentative, a fragile bond born from curiosity and respect. Elias realized that this encounter would define his career, perhaps even change the way humanity approached first contact. Here was a creature feared across the planet, yet she had allowed him into her space without aggression. It was a testament to the power of intelligence, empathy, and the willingness to understand. As he drifted into a light sleep, Elias couldn't help but wonder what the next day would bring. Would Lyra test him further? Would she allow him to explore deeper into her world? One thing was certain. The deadliest alien girl alive had chosen to observe him, and in her way she had acknowledged his presence. For the first time on Violia, Elias felt a spark of hope, not just for the mission, but for the possibility of friendship across species. And somewhere in the glowing jungle, Lyra's eyes glimmered as if she, too, was considering the same thing. The next morning, the jungle of Violia seemed even more alive than before. The air was thick with mist, making every leaf, vine, and tree shimmer in soft green light. Birds with iridescent feathers called out, their songs echoing strangely through the dense trees. Elias woke early, careful not to disturb Lyra, who had not moved from her perch nearby. Her glowing eyes watched him quietly as if studying his every action. Elias smiled softly. He had spent the night thinking about her. She was dangerous, yes, but he had seen something in her, a curiosity, a sense of awareness that was almost human. She was not just a predator. She was intelligent, cautious, and capable of understanding him in ways few creatures could. He gathered his instruments, taking detailed notes on the strange patterns of the jungle and the behavior of the animals. Every sound, every flicker of light, every movement of the creatures was recorded. But all the while, his mind returned to Lyra. She had stayed close, observing him, and Elias felt a strange sense of companionship forming. Suddenly, a loud rustle echoed from the nearby trees. Elias turned sharply, expecting a predator. Before he could react further, a massive creature lunged from the underbrush. It was like nothing he had ever seen, a quadruped with glowing red eyes and spiky scales along its back. Elias froze, heart hammering. This was why the early reports had warned about this region. Dangerous creatures lurked everywhere. Lyra moved instantly. In a blur of motion, she leapt from her perch and landed between Elias and the predator. Her speed and strength were terrifying. The creature lunged again, and Lyra countered with a sweep of her arm that knocked it sideways. Elias watched in awe. He had read about her strength, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. The creature roared and lunged a third time. Lyra's movements were precise and fluid. She dodged, countered, and finally grabbed the predator by its limbs, hurling it into a cluster of trees. Leaves and branches exploded outward, and when the dust settled, the creature lay stunned, clearly defeated. Lyra's chest rose and fell rapidly, and she turned to Elias, her glowing eyes softening. Elias felt a surge of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She didn't respond in words, but the way she lingered nearby, watching him, felt like acknowledgement. Once the predator had disappeared, Elias realized that he and Lyra had crossed an unspoken line of trust. She had saved his life, not because she had to, but because she chose to. For a creature feared as the deadliest on her planet, that was extraordinary. As they moved deeper into the jungle, Elias began to talk softly, narrating his observations of the plants, the insects, and the strange formations of the land. Lyra followed silently at first, then gradually started responding in subtle ways. She would touch a plant that Elias mentioned, tilt her head when he spoke, and occasionally emit soft vocalizations. Though he couldn't understand her language fully, he could sense her moods and reactions. At one point, they reached a small clearing where a waterfall poured into a crystal-clear pool. Elias knelt by the water, dipping his hands in to study the currents and the tiny aquatic creatures. Lyra watched from the edge, her reflection shimmering beside his. Elias smiled, gently tossing a pebble into the water. The ripples spread, catching Lyra's attention. She stepped forward, curiosity taking over caution, and tapped the water with one finger. The ripples intersected with Elias' and for a moment they both just watched the patterns expand and fade. It was a small, peaceful moment, a rare pause in the dangerous and unpredictable environment around them. As the day progressed, Elias and Lyra explored together. They discovered a grove of luminous mushrooms that glowed softly at their touch. Elias carefully documented them, explaining what he observed to Lyra in the softest tones. She seemed to understand, repeating gestures and touching the mushrooms gently. It was clear she was learning from him and he from her. Hours later, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the jungle darkened and strange noises filled the air. Elias felt a shiver of unease. This region of the jungle was known for night predators, and he knew it would be dangerous to linger without proper defenses. Before he could voice his concern, Lyra moved toward a dense thicket, her eyes glowing faintly. Elias hesitated, but curiosity won over caution. He followed her silently, trusting her instincts. They reached a small cave, partially hidden by thick vines. Lyra slipped inside and gestured for him to join. Inside, the cave was surprisingly spacious, with natural formations that reflected the soft bioluminescence of the walls. Elias set down his pack and began examining the area. Lyra watched him silently, her posture relaxed but alert. It was the first time she had allowed him into her personal space. Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest. Trust was a rare commodity, especially from someone or something as powerful as Lyra. He realized that their bond was growing, not through words, but through shared experiences and mutual respect. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from deeper within the cave. Elias froze. Lyra's ears twitched and her tail flicked sharply. Without hesitation, she moved toward the sound, Elias following cautiously. A small, injured creature lay on the ground, its leg trapped under a fallen rock. Elias stepped forward to help, but Lyra held up a hand, signaling him to wait. With a soft growl, she lifted the rock effortlessly, freeing the creature. It scuttled a short distance away, safe once more. Elias was amazed. She had not only strength, but a sense of compassion he had not expected from someone labeled Deadliest. As they exited the cave, Elias spoke softly. "You saved me, and now you've saved another. You're not just strong, you're kind." Lyra looked at him, and for a brief moment her eyes seemed almost to smile. Night fell fully, and the jungle came alive with glowing insects and distant calls. Elias and Lyra found a safe spot to rest, a small plateau overlooking the jungle canopy. Elias unrolled his sleeping mat and settled down, keeping his equipment close. Lyra watched him, her glowing eyes soft in the moonlight. After some time, she cautiously stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his face. Elias held his breath, unsure what to expect. Then, almost imperceptibly, she lowered herself, resting her head near his chest. The movement was slow, deliberate, and filled with trust. Elias felt a warmth spread through him. Here was the deadliest creature on Violia, choosing to rest near him, showing a gesture of peace and acceptance. He reached out slowly, gently placing a hand on her back. She shivered slightly but did not move away. Instead, a soft, vibrating sound emerged from her throat, a purr. It was a moment of quiet connection, a rare bond forming between two beings from entirely different worlds. Elias realized that their relationship was no longer just about study or curiosity. It was about trust, understanding, and the fragile beginnings of friendship. As he drifted into sleep, the jungle humming softly around them, Elias thought about the day's events. He had faced danger, witnessed incredible strength, and discovered a side of Lyra that few others had ever seen. The deadliest alien girl alive was no longer just a story or a legend. She was real, alive, and a companion in ways he had never expected. And somewhere in the glowing night, Lyra's eyes reflected the same understanding. She had chosen to stay, to trust, and perhaps in her own way to enjoy the company of a human who dared to see beyond her fearsome reputation. The jungle slept around them, but a bond had been forged, delicate yet strong, and the promise of tomorrow held adventures, discoveries, and challenges they would face together. Humanity's ingenuity and courage had found a way to reach a being thought unreachable, and in return, Lyra's strength and curiosity had given Elias a connection he could never have imagined. For Elias, it was more than a mission. It was the beginning of a journey that would redefine both his understanding of life and the way humans could touch the hearts of creatures far beyond their world. The next day dawned bright and clear over the jungle of Violia. Elias woke to the soft hum of alien insects and the gentle sway of leaves above him. Lyra was already awake, perched nearby, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She had rested closer to him through the night, and the faint warmth of her presence still lingered beside his chest. For Elias, it was a comforting reminder that their bond had grown deeper than either of them had expected. Today, they had a goal. Reports had indicated that a section of the jungle was unstable, and a small settlement of alien creatures was at risk of being swept away by sudden floods caused by a weakened riverbank. Elias and Lyra moved carefully through the dense underbrush, navigating the twisting vines and glowing plants. Every step was a mixture of caution and excitement. Elias studied the terrain, mapping the safest routes and observing the river's flow. Lyra moved silently beside him, her senses alert, detecting small shifts in the ground and distant sounds that Elias could not hear. Together, they were a perfect team. His intelligence and problem-solving skills combined with her speed and strength made them efficient, almost unstoppable. As they approached the threatened settlement, Elias caught sight of the creatures they were meant to help. They were small, furry beings with glowing eyes, no larger than a rabbit. They clustered near the river, unaware of the danger, playing and foraging. Elias frowned. Without immediate action, the riverbank could collapse within hours. Lyra signaled for him to wait and crept forward. Elias watched her move, amazed at her precision and control. She approached the riverbank carefully, testing the ground with her foot, then turning to Elias with a nod. Together, they began the work. Elias guided her, explaining where support structures could be placed using fallen branches and vines. Lyra's strength allowed her to move massive pieces effortlessly, securing the bank and creating a temporary barrier to prevent flooding. The creatures watched curiously, chirping and squeaking. Some even mimicked Lyra's movements, cautiously helping by moving small branches under her guidance. Elias laughed softly. It was extraordinary to see cooperation between species so different from one another. As the day progressed, the sky darkened suddenly. Storm clouds gathered faster than expected, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. The river swelled, threatening to overflow. Elias' heart raced, but Lyra remained calm, her focus unwavering. She barked sharp vocalizations, signaling Elias to adjust the barriers. Together, they worked against time, their movements synchronized in a way that only came from growing trust and understanding. A massive surge of water hit the riverbank, testing the structures they had built. Elias stumbled but was caught instantly by Lyra's strong hands. The creatures scattered to safer ground, guided by her presence. The barriers held, though barely. Elias' chest heaved with exertion, but he felt exhilarated. They had succeeded. The settlement was safe. Once the storm passed, Elias and Lyra stood together, dripping wet but triumphant. He looked at her, admiration and gratitude shining in his eyes. "You saved them," he said softly, "and me, again." Lyra tilted her head, her glowing eyes meeting his. There was no pride, no boast, just calm acknowledgement. Elias realized that she did not act out of desire for recognition. She acted because it was right. They rested on a small outcrop overlooking the river, both catching their breath. Elias pulled out his notebook and began recording the events, documenting not just the technical aspects, but the collaboration, the trust, and the understanding that had allowed them to succeed. Lyra watched him, occasionally touching a leaf or flicking her tail, seemingly approving of his work. As the sun began to set, Elias felt a strange sense of contentment. They had faced danger together, overcome obstacles, and helped those in need. But more than that, he felt a deeper connection with Lyra. She had shown him courage, strength, and a rare capacity for understanding and trust. He reached out slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. She leaned into the touch, a soft purr vibrating from her throat. Elias smiled. "You're incredible," he whispered. Lyra's eyes glimmered softly, reflecting the golden light of the sunset. She did not speak, but her presence said more than words ever could. Night fell again, but this time it was calm. The jungle seemed to breathe with them, and Elias and Lyra settled near a small campfire he had made. Lyra rested beside him, her head eventually finding its familiar spot on his chest. The warmth and trust between them were palpable, a silent testament to the bond that had grown over days of shared danger and mutual respect. Elias thought about the journey they had taken together. At first, he had approached her with curiosity and caution, eager to study the so-called deadliest alien girl alive. But over time, that had changed. He had come to admire her for more than her strength. He respected her intelligence, her instincts, and her capacity for trust. And somehow he realized she had come to see him as more than just an observer, a companion, perhaps even a friend. Their quiet moment was interrupted by distant sounds, a faint, rhythmic thumping coming from deeper in the jungle. Elias frowned. He recognized it immediately, a herd of large creatures moving quickly, possibly stampeding toward the river. He looked at Lyra. She tensed instantly, ready for action. Without words, they moved as one. Elias followed her lead, guiding the creatures with gestures and his voice, while Lyra used her presence and speed to direct the larger animals away from danger. The scene was chaotic, but their coordination was flawless. In moments the herd was safely redirected, the threat to the river and the smaller creatures avoided. Breathless but victorious, Elias leaned against a tree, letting out a laugh of relief. Lyra approached and nudged him gently with her head. He patted her back, smiling. She purred softly, a sound that had become familiar, comforting, and entirely unique to her. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Elias realized that their adventures were far from over. Violia was full of mysteries, challenges, and creatures that tested every skill he possessed. But he also knew that he would not face them alone. With Lyra by his side, he had strength, intelligence, and trust. Together, they were capable of far more than either could achieve alone. He watched her settle again on his chest, her purring rhythmic and soothing. Elias closed his eyes, letting the exhaustion of the day wash over him. The jungle hummed around them, alive with unseen life, and yet in this moment everything felt safe. He felt a surge of gratitude for the bond they had formed. It was more than companionship. It was mutual respect. It was understanding. It was the quiet, unspoken connection between two beings from entirely different worlds, finding harmony and trust despite differences that would have kept most apart. Elias realized that humanity had much to learn from this experience. Strength was not just in power or technology, but in empathy, curiosity, and courage. Humanity's ingenuity had allowed him to survive and connect with a being thought untouchable, and in return, Lyra's trust had taught him lessons of patience, observation, and respect. Night deepened, and the jungle settled into a soft, rhythmic chorus of sounds. Lyra shifted slightly, resting her head closer, and Elias felt the steady beat of her breathing against him. He smiled softly, closing his eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and perhaps new adventures. But tonight, he allowed himself to simply be present, sharing warmth, safety, and quiet friendship with the deadliest alien girl alive. Elias thought about the journey they had taken, from curiosity to danger to mutual trust. Every moment, every challenge had led them to this, a rare bond forged in the wild heart of an alien world. He realized that in a universe full of danger, unpredictability, and unknown beings, connection was the greatest strength. Lyra purred softly, a sound of contentment, and Elias allowed himself to drift fully into sleep, knowing that the bond they had formed was unshakable. The deadliest alien girl alive, feared by her own species, had chosen to trust him. And in doing so, she had shown him a truth that transcended planets, species, and fear. Courage, understanding, and kindness could build bridges stronger than the strongest walls. In the soft glow of Violia's night, Elias and Lyra slept, two very different beings united by experience, trust, and a bond that promised countless adventures yet to come. And for the first time, Elias understood something profound. The heart of humanity was not just survival, but the ability to reach out, to connect, and to inspire trust in even the most formidable of creatures. The jungle hummed around them, alive and endless, but within their small circle of warmth and trust, there was peace. And in that peace, a story had begun. A story of courage, curiosity, and the quiet, powerful magic of friendship that crossed the boundaries of worlds.